Good morning, everybody. What a great morning to be here, and let's give a round of applause for Mary Kubik, Gold Star sister. I mean, holy cow. Way to go. I'd like to welcome friends, family, rangers, and all our distinguished guests to Hurley Hill. For those unfamiliar with this area, this is a sacred place for generations of rangers. Thousands have run, jumped, swam, and even several have fallen off the beam over here and fallen into the water in a chance to try to earn the coveted Ranger tab. Proof that they were found worthy of joining the brotherhood, defined by pushing the limits of physical capabilities and mental fortitude. There's no better location for a memorial to a man who embodied the same pillars of excellence, COL Ralph Puckett Jr, the Ranger's Ranger. I will leave it to Rob Choppa to tell the story of how it became and located here, because it's a special story and really started the course of events culminating in today's dedication. But it goes now without saying that the Puckett family holds a special place in the heart of the National Infantry Museum Foundation, the National Infantry Association, and the whole Ranger Broad community. Our paths have been intertwined for many decades, not just years. And so it is our great honor to help dedicate this memorial for future Rangers and their families, so that they can be inspired by a great Ranger and lead the way like he did, with heart. At the museum, our mission is to preserve and protect the legacy of the infantry soldier, so stories of sacrifice and unyielding commitment, like those of Ralph Puckett, can continue to encourage all of us to give 100% and then some. We would not be here today without the generosity of so many donors and groups who have also shared in the hope of honoring Ralph's legacy. With our partner, the National Infantry Association, we'd like to thank the National Ranger Association, the National Ranger Memorial Foundation, Mr. and Mrs. Edwards, Mr. Gorski, Cecil and Betty Cheeves, Jack and Joe Repiesolt, and the whole Puckett family, and so many others who have donated large and small, have gifted this to future generations and have made the difference in terms of making this project cross the finish line. This brings me to the impressive memorial before us, created by a phenomenal project team, design and construction team of Phyllis and Newt Aaron Clements, Thayer Bray Construction, and of course, Warren Sculpture Studios. Jay Warren is the artistic talent beyond not one, but now two statues of Ralph. The first one being a young Lieutenant Puckett at the Battle of Hill 205 at our Korean War Memorial at the National Infantry Museum. And a second that will stand here at Hurley Hill, a Colonel Puckett who will soon be unveiled as the longest serving regimental colonel of the regiment. Based on Miss Jeannie's reaction to the uncrating and a little bit of fear as we try to get this on the pedestal, I think the design and vision is a success. I'd like to thank DPW and Kirk Tickner, the Maneuver Center of Excellence, the Installation Material Command for the coordination with us and the entire project team. Your work ensured that this critical piece of art was not only beautifully installed, but in the Army had to be documented and has now been gifted to the installation and accepted, especially on this meaningful anniversary for the Ranger community. The entire memorial was fundraised, designed, and constructed, traveled, and installed in 1 year. We are honored to be part of this tremendous journey and bring Colonel Puckett back to the Ranger community in a prominent location. Incredible work. Thank you for everybody on this project. Please give them a round of applause. And finally, a sincere thanks not only to the Maneuver Center of Excellence, but the 75th Ranger Regiment, the Airborne Ranger Training Brigade, and specifically Echo Company of the 507th for going above and beyond to provide us the logistical support for the ceremony, allowing us not only to unveil, but help kick off the 75th anniversary of the Ranger Department and school. Seeing all of us here today working together and celebrating the legacy of the Ranger community would have been exactly what Colonel Ralph Puckett wouldn't have missed. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the National Infantry Association, Colonel Retired Rob Chapa.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Pete. This day is important, as 75 years ago, Ranger School started. Also 75 years ago, Lieutenant Ralph Puckett was fighting for his life and the lives of his men on Hill 205. It's also the anniversary of Ralph and Jeannie Puckett. Happy anniversary, Jeannie. This statue is important as it pays tribute to a man that was a ranger, a man that developed and trained rangers, a man that mentored rangers, a man that loved rangers, a man that lived the ranger creed, and finally a man that is a ranger legend. The location is important as it's on ranger land, here on Hurley Hill, honoring Sergeant Major Pat Hurley, 3rd 375 Ranger who gave his life for this nation. For on this land, Ralph is overlooking Ranger graduations, positioned to witness the joy of Rangers, the pride of their families, and the brotherhood of the Rangers from their units. The messages on this memorial are important, as they're the words Ranger Puckett lived by. Most of all, continuing the memory and our enduring love for Colonel Ranger Ralph Puckett is so important. We're proud that his family, friends, and fellow Rangers are here. Now I'm going to tell you a story. It's a good one because it's a true story. Before Colonel Puckett had received the Medal of Honor, we're driving out to another Ranger event. We went to many. Ranger PT tests, Ranger graduation, Ranger briefs and talks with Rangers, breakfast with Rangers, and even out to Darby to walk with Ranger patrols. As we drove around, we discussed a lot of things. Ralph also was quick to assess my driving as we traveled. On this one day, I asked him, "Ralph, what about us building a statue in your honor?" Of course, in true Ralph Puckett fashion, he replied, "That's not necessary. No one would want that." And he said, "No one would want to see a statue of me, not even Jeannie." I disagreed and we bantered about it as we drove down the road. Ralph then went silent in thought. I broke the silence and told him that his Rangers would want a statue of him. We continued down the road. Ralph thought about it deeply. We discussed statues of him and his men in close combat like he faced in Korea. We discussed his leadership under fire and him fighting in Vietnam. We discussed his mentoring of Rangers as the honorary colonel of the regiment. He stopped me. He said, "Rob, the only statue I'd want would be one of me overlooking Ranger graduations. I want that statue on Hurley Hill." I said, "Great. We could build one of you leaning over Ranger students in a patrol base." He said, "No." I said, "We could have one of you on patrol with Ranger students." He said, "No." After a while, he said, "I'd like one of me standing at attention, saluting the Rangers and their proud family members as they go by to watch and witness the Ranger graduations." He thought a little more and then he said, "Maybe Jeannie would love that statue." I let that sink in, and I told him every Ranger in the world would love that statue. With that, we started to work to resource this, design this, and today we unveiled this statue. Colonel Puckett approved this concept and design. Ralph will be proud that you're all here with us today. I have a picture of him on my desk. He looks over me every day. I talk to him and often make decisions based on the premise, what would Ranger Puckett do? It's a great compass in life. So proud to be a part of this. Thanks for listening to our story. I'm prouder to be Ralph Puckett's last Ranger buddy. I'm thankful for his family for letting me participate in this special and memorable event. Thank you.
It is now my pleasure to introduce Major General Colin Tooley, the Commanding General of the Maneuver Center of Excellence in Fort Benning.
All right, hey, Rob Chapa, hey, Well said. I'm sitting over there getting teary-eyed with you. I think a lot of us out here, we all have memories of Ralph Puckett. And I'll cover some of those in my speech today as well if I get a little long or a little winded here. But he has touched everybody. And if he hasn't touched you personally and directly, he has touched you indirectly many times over. Because he has affected so many leaders in our great nation, both civilian and both military, okay? And so Colonel Ralph Puckett used to refer to himself as a man of good fortune. Well, this morning I feel just that. I am fortunate to be given the honor of speaking to you today on this great occasion. I am fortunate to have known Colonel Ralph Puckett and his wife Jeannie. My life is richer for it. How fortunate to have been able to call him a friend and a mentor. I am a better soldier because of it. If you knew him, I know you feel the same way. How fortunate we are to benefit from his leadership and his guidance. We are a better Army because of Ralph Puckett. Generations of Rangers who follow us will benefit in the classrooms, out on the battlefields, because Ranger Puckett led the way. We're lucky, and I use that word loosely, to have this statue to ensure that they appreciate their benefactor, that they will know who he was, that they will know about the man whose legacy is equal to his legend. We are all lucky that Ralph Puckett did not pursue his childhood dream, if you did not know, of joining the Air Force. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941, he was just 2 days shy of his 15th birthday. That was the year that he earned his pilot's license and set his sights on becoming a fighter pilot. At 17, he enlisted in the Army Air Corps Reserve. In the fall of 45, he entered West Point. The inscription on his class ring reads Air Force. Fortunately for Cadet Puckett, and for you and for me and tens of thousands of U.S. Army Rangers, he visited Fort Bragg that summer of his senior year at the Academy. The 82nd Airborne soldiers impressed him so much that he changed his mind about the Air Force, and he has said that is one of the best decisions he has ever made. I know this much: if he had followed through with the Air Force, they'd probably be dedicating a statue down in Eglin or Maxwell or Little Rock, Arkansas. So here we are today. In 1950, a year after he graduated from West Point, the nation was at war in Korea. And Second Lieutenant Puckett learned of plans to activate the first Ranger Company since World War II. He wanted a part of it. He didn't care what it was. He'd be a team leader, squad leader, or just a rifleman, but he wanted to be a part of that Ranger Company. Well, the officer in charge of staff in that company loved what he saw in Ralph Puckett, and so he put him in charge. Even though he was a lieutenant, he made Lieutenant Puckett the company commander. The only stipulation he gave him was Lieutenant Puckett could not recruit to trained riflemen. He had to build it himself. So he went out there and he scrounged up volunteers, from mechanics to clerks to cooks, anybody anxious for an adventure. He trained them rigorously. And on this day, 75 years ago, after a number of successful operations, he took the 8th Army Ranger Company on a deadly mission. They took the objective, Hill 205, and dug into the frozen ground to establish a defense. Lieutenant Puckett arranged for artillery support. Shortly after dark, a force of more than 600 Chinese began attacking in waves, one right after another. The Americans held them off time and time again, but they were outnumbered. Between the attacks, you could see Lieutenant Ralph Puckett out there doing a little battlefield circulation, out there shooting the breeze with his soldiers. What he was doing was he was inspiring. He was motivating. He was showing that as a leader, he's out there with them all the time. At one point, when his troops could not ferret out the enemy positions, Lieutenant Puckett left the safety of concealment, dashed out there into the clearing, intentionally drawing enemy fire so they would give away their positions. He did that 3 times. 1 time makes you a hero. 3 times makes you a superhero. And then at 2:45 a.m., as the Chinese launched a 6th assault, his final call for fire support went unanswered. 2 mortar shells landed in his command post. severely injuring Lieutenant Ralph Puckett and killing his West Point classmate in the foxhole beside him. Realizing they were running out of time, Lieutenant Puckett ordered his men to withdraw and to leave him behind. Two of his Rangers returned just as the Chinese reached their positions. They dragged Puckett down the hill to safety. At that time, Lieutenant Puckett was shipped out here. He had to recover. He came out here to Fort Benning, where he was to recover at Martin Army Community Hospital, where he spent nearly a year recovering. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions on Hill 205. More than 70 years later, in 2021, he was awarded the Medal of Honor. Long overdue. Between Hill 205 and the Medal of Honor, Colonel Puckett distinguished himself as a warrior and a leader over and over again. In Vietnam, during the Tet Offensive, he commanded 101st 1st Brigade. He was awarded his second Distinguished Service Cross after rescuing 2 wounded soldiers during an intense mortar barrage. About a month later, he earned a Silver Star after sustaining injuries when the enemy infiltrated the defensive perimeter and lobbed a grenade into his tactical command post. Puckett staggered to his feet, reorganized a perimeter defense, and refused medical evacuation until he can get all of his injured soldiers evacuated first. Colonel Puckett distinguished himself throughout his life in so many ways, but the world will define his greatness by the Medal of Honor, so let me acknowledge that. Back in 2006, 15 years before he was awarded the medal, he spoke at a ceremony honoring local Medal of Honor recipients. He spoke the words that described their character. He stated, what they did, the actions that they took, required so much courage that they would not have been criticized if they had not taken any of it. But in one moment of time, each one of these individuals was as great as any man can be. Well, Ralph Puckett was as great as any man can be, and not for a moment, but for a lifetime. He was an exceptional human being. He said that night on Hill 205 helped to find him, and I appreciate that. But I would actually add the definition of Colonel Puckett, it wasn't about Hill 205. Hill 205 revealed who he was. He was so much more than a brave man who found himself in the wrong place at the right time. That's what the world will remember him for. But for those of us who were privileged to know him, we'll always remember that he gave everything on and off the battlefield to inspire great soldiers and great leaders. The evidence of his genius is found in the writings he left us and the generations of soldiers who marked their encounter with Colonel Puckett as pivotal to their journey toward leadership. He was a thoughtful academic who wrote insightful articles and essays on military history, the nature of warfare, and the nature of the soldier. He wrote books that should be on every soldier's reading list. He believed that you could take good men and by combat-focused, realistic, high-standard training, turn them into combat infantrymen, effective soldiers, effective Rangers. Those were his words. He believed in standards, training, and motivation. Before he retired from the Army in 1971, he was awarded another Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, 3 Legions of Merit, 5 Purple Hearts, and dozens more. Enough medals and accolades to earn him a place among the Army's most decorated soldiers. Every single one of them has a story behind, and collectively they do not do him justice. In 1992, he was the inaugural inductee into the Ranger Hall of Fame. He served for over a decade as the first honorary colonel of the 75th Ranger Regiment. In 2004, he was named the Distinguished Graduate of the United States Military Academy, and then in 2007, he was presented the Doughboy Award, the Infantryman's Lifetime Achievement Award. Colonel Puckett was a quiet and humble hero. Friends and neighbors learned about his Medal of Honor when they saw it in the local news. The local news reached out. They wanted to get a list of all the accolades. They wanted to have to identify him. And he goes, hey, just identify me as the honorary colonel of the 75th Ranger Regiment. He knew the title would mean more to those who understood it than any other very long list of accomplishments or awards. He was a soldier's soldier. He was called the Ranger, not a Ranger. He was called the Ranger. This community and the Army cherish the memory of Ralph Puckett, and as you can see in the naming of the Puckett Parkway, his exhibit at the National Infantry Museum, the leadership awards that bear his name on the Eternal Flame Memorial down in Columbus. But nothing quite captures the hearts like the figure of the man. That's why this statue is so important. I said at the beginning, Colonel Puckett once referred to himself as a man of good fortune. He was speaking specifically about the circumstances that brought him and Jeannie back together back in 1950, during that year that he spent here at Morton Army Hospital. They were married 73 years ago. Well done, Jeannie. When you asked him what he was most proud of, he always started off with, my wife, Jeannie, and my kids. That's what he was proud of. Jeannie, you've been also an inspiration to generations, not just of leaders, but of spouses. So my heartfelt thanks to you. I got to experience it from you being a young lieutenant, married to Jen, and being to experience that with you and Ralph for all these years. And just know that you have touched many, many leaders, many, many families, and generations of spouses. So my heartfelt thanks to you and to the whole entire Puckett family. Jeannie, on behalf of the U.S. Army Rangers, past, present, and future, thank you for sharing your husband with us. And I would just tell you, for me, it's fitting. I'm going to end it here. I do have a life story, just like, Rob Chapa. I started my Ranger career just a couple miles over here on Kilo 22. If you don't know it, go look at a map. We're doing a Ranger Company live fire. I was a Ranger platoon leader. First time doing a live fire. First time doing anything really in the Rangers. And I got told, hey, Lieutenant Tooley, you got Colonel Ralph Puckett who's going to walk behind your platoon during the live fire. I was simply horrified. All right? I think I completely forgot about the live fire plan. I didn't know where I was. I was just seeing stars. Because the only thing going through my head was, I cannot be that guy that something happens to Colonel Puckett out here on the live fire. And here's what Colonel Puckett did. He saw me. He could probably see me sweating, see me trembling or whatever. He came up to me, put his hand on my shoulder out there on Kilo 22. He goes, Ranger Tooley, I've been in a couple firefights. It's going to be okay. And that was it. Okay? That's the kind of guy Ralph Puckett was. He saw it and he intervened right there. Years later, I remember as a Ranger field grade, I was up in Fort Lewis. He came up to visit some of our training up there. One of those evenings, he said, hey, then I was a major. He's like, hey, Major Tooley, hey, I want to take you and some of the other young field grade officers out to dinner. And so we went out to dinner. Of course, we were all fighting over who's going to get to pay for Colonel Puckett's dinner. He stopped everyone, and he put his hand down. Almost like a knife hand, all right? But he put his hand down and he goes, I'm paying for all of you because it's my honor to be with you. That's the kind of guy Colonel Puckett is. When I was stationed here at Fort Benning, my wife and I, 2 daughters, we're trying to figure out how we're going to PCS, get things going. Without even skipping a beat, him and Jeannie just said, no, we got this. You're just going to stay at our house. And we stayed at the Puckett's house for that week as we were clearing. Again, that is Ralph Puckett. That is Jeannie Puckett. That's what they do for everybody. So my thanks again, Jeannie, for this is a special day for all of us out here. God bless the memory of Colonel Ralph Puckett. God bless the Puckett family. God bless the United States Army, and especially the Rangers that he so dearly loved. Rangers lead the way.
It is now my honor and privilege to introduce Mrs. Jeannie Puckett.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I hope everybody can hear me. Let me know if you can. It takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a special team to raise a statue. And that team started with the beginning when some of the Rangers started a GoFundMe with the idea of building this statue. And the team took that and moved forward and solicited donations, and many of you donated, for which I'm very grateful. Part of the team had to work with Washington, D.C. and the Pentagon to get permission to put a private memorial on government property. If you've worked with the government, you know how difficult that was. Part of the team designed the statue, they designed the setting, they drew up the plans, they spoke with and hired the artist that created it, and worked with him diligently while he was working on it to make sure that every detail of the uniform fit the military standard. And when that was over, they crated it on the West Coast, shipped it to Georgia, and I was here 3 or 4 days ago when they uncrated it. And this statue is an exact replica of my husband. I don't know how the team did that, but it's absolutely beautiful. And all of this could not have been done with the generosity of the donors who were here, and many of you are here today, and I am most appreciative of that. And you didn't just give money, you gave love and friendship, and it really touches me, and it honors me, and it honors my husband, and I will never be able to thank you enough. I would like to add one thing to the story about Ralph and this statue. When he found that the Rangers had started this GoFundMe, he was really touched, and he said, "Why would they do that?" And I said, "Maybe they like you." He found that impossible. And then at the same time, they were building the Korean War Memorial at the museum, and he knew that he would be one of those figures, which he was very honored. And he never brought up this statue again until about 2 weeks at the end of his life. One night, very quietly, he said to me, "Jeannie, you know, there are not going to be 2 statues of me at Fort Benning." And I said, "Well, I'm sure not." And he said, "If anyone asks you which I'd rather have, the one by the museum or the one out here at Hurley, I'd really rather be out at Hurley." And I said, "Well, first of all, nobody's going to ask me anything." And I said, "Next, the statue at the museum will be seen by thousands of people who come through there, and not only that, it will be lit at night." I said, "The statue out here will be in the dark." And he looked at me and he said, "Jeannie, for the last 12 years, I've been out there at 2 and 3 in the morning, every 6 weeks at the beginning of a Ranger class. And I've been there when the gnats and the mosquitoes, and it was hot and humid. I've been there when it's raining, I've been soaking wet. And I've been there when I'm freezing cold, my hands and feet are numb. But that's where I want to be." And so he said, "If there's a choice, I would like that." And I said, "Well, I don't know, you're mighty remote." He said, "I'm not worried. The Rangers have my back." So thank you, Rangers, all of you supported. Thank you very much.
At this time, Major General Tooley, Brigadier General Pete Jones, and Colonel Rob Chapa and Miss Jean Puckett will conduct the unveiling.
All right, let's do this on 3.
Give me 1 second.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. Oh, you got to